Okay, we'll get started then. Hello, everyone. So thanks for joining us. We're all part of an academic research at Berkeley called the Script Encoding Initiative. My name is Anushah Hossain, and I'm the current director. This is Helena, Kansa, our program manager, and Kyra and Dawkins, our blog manager. And we have Debbie Anderson here, who founded the project 20 years ago, and a lot of our collaborators in the audience.
Okay, so just to kick it off, SEI has two main streams of work. First, we contribute directly to the Unicode standard by researching and funding proposals to add new scripts and characters. Since 2002, SEI has focused primarily on historic scripts and modern minority scripts. These are often requiring careful coordination and a lot of consultation with experts and user communities. So that poses an investment that of a lot of time and resources that a lot of commercial actors are not necessarily willing to take. So that's kind of where SEI comes in to bridge that gap. Second, we also study the standards themselves from humanistic and critical perspectives. We think about questions like, what does it mean for a script to be encoded, and how does that affect a user community? We also think about how the underlying guiding principles of the Unicode standard have evolved over time, what they are, how they affect us and each other.
So our talk today brings these two strands together through simple but foundational question. How do we decide what scripts to put forward for encoding? In one sense, this is a purely practical question. We face it every year as we determine how to allocate our limited research funds. So, for example, suppose we have $20,000 to distribute. Which projects do we want to pursue that are most likely to pass muster in the encoding process and be implemented successfully in a digital environment? But also, it is an intellectual question. Embedded in this is a judgment about what defines whether a script can be recognized in digital life. By definition, the inclusion criteria leave certain types of systems out, revealing what kinds of writing or which regions face the steepest barriers in digital inclusion. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll share how we've begun to approach this question, and we'll walk you through our working framework for assessing a script's Unicode readiness and how it is informing new efforts, such as scripts databases for researchers and the World's Writing Systems Project, and our own website.
Awesome. So how do we actually decide if a script is ready for submission to Unicode? So to answer this question in a systematic way, we began working through our running list of over 150 unencoded scripts, speaking with experts about each one to gauge their sense of readiness. So initially, these were rather unstructured conversations that led to notes like the ones you see on the left, where we let the respondents share whatever details that they felt were most relevant. But as we listened to them, common factors began to emerge, things like the availability of materials, evidence of institutional acceptance, and the stability and in the shapes and names. So from these themes, we could extract a kind of informal decision tree that our interlocutors were working through, even if they didn't frame it exactly in those terms. So that resulted in the kind of guide you see on the right that we'll talk about more in a second. And this was a way to make their tacit reasoning visible. As we worked through that very long list of scripts, we noticed something else. The scripts themselves tended to cluster. Even though each case had its own idiosyncrasies, it became possible to see patterns, to estimate how much work it might take to get a script encoded or whether encoding was feasible at all. So again, you're getting a glimpse of our kind of scattered notes on the left where we were grouping scripts together, and then our resulting rubric in the right that we'll talk about more in just a moment. So we started to share these draft formalized materials with experts. And as we did, we were happy to see that they were using this framework intuitively. We would give them our rubric and they were able to sort the scripts into categories without much prompting. So for any academics in the room, you could say this was an inductive, co-productive approach where we worked from the bottom up and came up with the details together with the people we were trying to study in a way. Over the past year, we shared these materials with Unicode's Script Encoding Working Group, which is in its own process of refining its proposal submission process and introducing a new checklist of criteria. So because this review committee really directly shapes SEI's proposal work, this rubric was a really important way for us to participate in their process and offer our own articulation of what we think readiness looks like and check that we're aligned. And it helps refine some of our framing. We adjusted wording and got a sense of what Unicode's priorities were. And I think it validated these materials as a helpful kind of shared reference for SEI and Script Encoding Working Group. So I'll talk through the cascading set of questions first, and then the ref thresholds. So the guide on the left, it's on our website under tips for proposals, and we'll show that too. So the guide that we have, it starts with a deceptively simple question. Is it a script? There are a lot of different ways to define script. You'll see kind of a different definition in every academic manuscript that you open, but they circle around common characteristics, which we found resonate with Unicode reviewers as well. So roughly, we define a script as a visual system for communication, so something that's written down, that uses recurring symbols with stable meanings, meaning there's some consistency that can be formalized in a technical standard, and that is shared by a social group. So this part points towards acceptance by a community. So this question is really important because it helps us distinguish between what might otherwise be like artwork or ornamentation that's not suited to a text standard, and it ensures that the thing that we're talking about is used for communication, which is at the crux of Unicode. So our second question, it really is the earlier one, but broken down into more specific. So we have 3 clusters: acceptance, stability or durability, and need for distinction. So this is really what Unicode experts ask as they work through scripts, even if they're not publishing or saying this checklist themselves. This was our kind of read on that. So under acceptance, we see whether a community has a community of users. Sorry, whether a script has a community of users. This means evidence of use beyond a single inventor or a small circle. This is really important for newer scripts where you're not sure if it's just an idea or something that's in practical use. We have questions here about how the script is used, what domain, whether that's education, religion, publishing, or everyday communication. It doesn't have to be all of the above, but it's good to be able to say what that domain is. And we ask about institutional recognition. This question matters because Unicode isn't a list of every script that exists in the world. It's a long-term infrastructure for digital communication, as I've been saying. So the reviewers, we found, increasingly want to check that there is a community that will use the script once it's available online, and want to make sure that they're not kind of accidentally platforming something that hasn't been embraced. Under stability, the questions ask about scripts' forms and meanings and whether they're settled enough to design a consistent digital encoding. So this question is really crucial because Unicode only wants to encode what's durable, what won't change dramatically after it's been published in the standard. This is because the standard has something called a stability guarantee. Once something is encoded, it can't be removed or revised. So when there's any evidence of discord or unsettledness, reviewers tend to take caution and slow down the process. So there are some specifics here, like an active use for at least 5 years. This is something we've kind of thrown out. It seems to be what people expect, but these are kind of the points that we're still negotiating and articulating as a group. And then finally, need for distinction asks whether the proposed characters can be unified with existing ones or whether a new Unicode block is truly required. And this consideration stems from Unicode's characters, not glyphs policy. It means that new additions must show semantic, not just visual difference. So for all of these in practice, there are rarely straightforward answers. There's often important context from each script community that requires some kind of exception. And we've seen many of our proposal authors surface these unique conditions successfully to push a script through. So we'll just talk through a couple of these examples. So this is an example on acceptance from the Mongwego script. So reviewers, like we said, tend to ask about institutional acceptance or evidence of printed material, but we've seen that you can still demonstrate widespread use if those things don't exist. Now, Mongwego is a script from Malawi invented in the late 1970s. There's no government recognition and limited print material, but our proposal author was able to show that the script had taken on a life beyond the inventor circle by including a plethora of handwritten material from people who didn't know each other. So he made a point of saying, these are different types of handwriting from people located here, writing at this time, and added this kind of personal comment that I was the one who actually introduced them to each other. And that resonated in showing that this had really grown and taken on a broader sphere of influence. To answer questions about stability, one of our approaches has been to collect in-depth evidence on cases where there might be uncertainty. So this example is from the Lampung script from the southern Sumatra region of Indonesia. So Lampung is a historic script. It's about 1,000 years old, but it's been recently revived with new punctuation, numerals, vowel signs proposed in orthographic reforms over the past few decades. So this is something where you have a question about stability of these new reforms. So to check whether they had actually taken root, we funded someone to do field work in southern Sumatra, and our researcher went and observed public signage, looked at school materials, talked to children and asked them to write words, and kind of collected published texts. So from all of that, we were able to see that some, but not all of the reforms had been accepted. So we could put forward a very specific subset of the new additions from the modern reform that we can say are stable enough, they've been used for at least a generation, and are suitable for encoding while setting the others aside for later. And then finally, on the need for distinction, we've seen the argument for a separate code block made successfully on several ambiguous cases. One example is the Lisu script at the top, which looks like Latin letters on a surface level, but the proposal authors showed that its grammar and function are entirely distinct. The same argument was made for Tirhusha, Anshu did this one, which visually looks just like Bangla, but operates under a different script grammar. So when there is a different script grammar, downstream software like layout and rendering engines often need to follow a different logic for the script, and this is a sufficient justification for encoding independent characters. So these scripts were able to be added as new code blocks despite their visual similarities to existing characters. So what these examples show us is that readiness is not a fixed checklist, but rather a set of prompts that help proposal authors surface the most distinctive aspects of their research, the details that are important for reviewers to see. So even if you have to answer no to one of the questions that we put up there on our guide, the answer can still be illuminating if contextualized clearly. So all of these questions gave us a way to think through a script's readiness, but we still wanted to compare across cases with ease and keep track of where each script stood. So to do that, we translated our qualitative case-by-case assessments into a simple readiness rubric. So this is not meant to be prescriptive, but serve as a kind of shorthand in the encoding process. So we have 3 broad levels: high, medium, and low, and unassigned for the scripts we don't have enough information about. High means that a script is almost ready for submission. There's consensus amongst experts. There are preliminary proposals already. Most of the work to be done is just kind of putting in a little bit more effort. Most of these scripts are ones that SEI is working on, like Kulitan or Proto-Cuneiform or Proto-Sinaitic that Anshu just presented about, or ones that we have seen work through the pipeline, like Leke. In the medium category, we have scripts that we've assessed are certainly viable for encoding, but there's just a lot more work to be done. So if you think back to the questions we just mentioned, we feel relative confidence on these that they can handle questioning from Unicode reviewers about adoption, stability, and need for distinction, and there's little doubt as to whether there are scripts. They are scripts. These, we would say, are great projects for others to pitch because there's often a latent interest in them and they just need an injection of energy to get moving. The examples here would include Demotic Egyptian. That's the one we put up there, where we know there's a catalog, we know of the experts, but we need someone to spend a lot of time going through the material and drawing a pretty complicated font. When we go to the low category, there's a bit of a jump. So these are ones that have significant barriers, external barriers, that unless external factors change, you're saying that they're not necessarily worthwhile to put forward as a submission to Unicode. So in this category, it covers a bunch of different things, but some of them are, say, proto-writing. So these are cases where experts have decided that, or assessed that the forms are not consistent enough to be suitable for encoding. So bronze script or oracle bone are examples there. A different type of case might be where there just isn't enough preserved material. We know that there was a script, but we just don't have enough surviving manuscripts to be able to document it enough. So that would be something like Brucia, a historic script. And then you also have newer inventions that, for now at least, strongly lack adoption. So some of these are older, newer scripts, like the Hausa scripts from West Africa. These were invented in the 1960s. We know of them, but they never really caught on. So those are in the low category, or super new inventions like the Golsa alphabet. That's from 2022. We know it exists, but for now, until there's really any users, we have it in the section.
And as we'll see in a few moments, we have made some tentative assignments into these categories for the nearly 200 unencoded scripts we're aware of. But we do have some important disclaimers that we need to make here. The boundaries that we present to you are not absolute by any means. A script can move up quickly if new scholarship appears, or if we locate an active user community. It'll give that injection of energy that Anushah talked about a little bit ago. Likewise, a script that once looked ready can shift down if we discover unresolved questions about its structure or use. And every time we look at these assessments, we tend to reassign a script or two. It is an ongoing challenge to maintain consistency across regions and gain wide but deep expertise in all these areas. So this is truly a living, breathing thing and an active work in progress. And finally, we want to make abundantly clear that these are not verdicts about a script's vitality or validity, its cultural importance, or potential in social life. Our aim with both the rubric and the tips for proposals is to not gatekeep at all, but to illuminate the pathway for communities, researchers, and funders to approach interacting with Unicode at large. So for us, what we see from applying this rubric is that even though there's something like 190 known unencoded scripts, about 90 of them would be considered viable for Unicode inclusion based on our current knowledge, which is significantly different, if still daunting, to-do list.
Okay, so to keep all of these assessments consistent across our many projects, we needed a much better way to store them and to update them. So that's what led us to build our new internal database. So before this, the data were scattered. There were multiple script spreadsheets that had all been edited at different times by different research assistants. And several of our collaborators also had their own spreadsheet, but none of it really stayed in sync. So we realized that part of the problem wasn't just duplication. It was about the limits of the spreadsheet format itself. Spreadsheets are oriented more towards being snapshots in time, which is helpful for producing calculations and stuff, but difficult for handling the relationships between different pieces of information. A database, in contrast, keeps one central record that can appear in different views. That means update a single field, say who authored a script proposal or the script's readiness level, and we can have it populate automatically across every view that we use internally and share externally. We ended up building our database in Airtable, which is a user-friendly database platform. Our database includes several tables, which are the tabs at the top, for scripts, contacts, funds, and proposals, and they're all linked together. And then within each table, we can create tailored views, which is what you see on the left side pop-out bar there. Those are for SCI staff, collaborators, or the public-facing views that we use for our website. And as we were building the database, we realized it could serve more than just our internal needs. It also became a way to connect SCI's work with larger efforts, like the World's Writing Systems poster and website there. Building this database and working through readiness assessments helped us notice tensions between the aims of the World's Writing Systems project and our unencoded scripts list. We were able to make useful distinctions, like noting the need for our list to contain orthographic variants, which often amount to Unicode code block extensions, while the World's Writing Systems could only contain the overarching scripts. Because of the possibilities presented by distinct views of the same data, we could accommodate both projects using one underlying base. So to populate the Airtable, we pulled information from trusted repositories. We see some listed here, like Ben Mitchell's site, Kushim Jiang's site, Tim Brooks's Endangered Alphabets, ScriptSource, Wikipedia, etc., and supplemented them through expert interviews, especially in underdocumented regions like Central America and West Africa. And as you can see, the scripts Airtable currently contains 384 script entries. That's that 384 records at the bottom left there. And 190 of these are unencoded. Kyra and I kind of broke this up by chunk to split it up by region in order to kind of handle all of this data. It was a lot. We researched each unencoded script to fill out as many fields in each record as possible, including the location of the script, the language or languages it represents, a sample image of the script if we could find one. That was a little hard sometimes. The script features like type, directionality, number of characters, a rough estimate of the script's origin, timeline, and vitality, any recent Unicode proposals and their authors, and of course, our script's readiness. Oh, I don't know what happened there. Have this? And of course, their Unicode readiness. Oh, where am I? Okay. Internally, we also keep track of whether each script is an SCI-funded project, who's working on them, and their status in the encoding pipeline. And then pinpointing the information to include in each of these cells was definitely no easy task. As you can probably imagine, there's very little information available on the web for unencoded scripts, particularly those with smaller user communities or elusive historic scripts. We cannot be experts for every region that we covered, and we're generally limited to English sources in our research. So that means that our options are kind of increasingly limited. And then often we would come across conflicting information in our research. Things like a script's origin date, number of characters, or script type are often heavily debated by experts, and thus reflected differently in different sources. If there's an existing document submitted to Unicode, we ended up prioritizing that information, but otherwise we were kind of finding ourselves facing difficult decisions about which side of scholarly debates to side with that we had no prior knowledge of or stake in. For instance, there are 3 distinct unencoded scripts in northern Myanmar that are all called Kadu, as you can see here. There is Kadu Asok Chain, Kadu Lon Okara, and Kadu Ulushi. According to Ben Mitchell, who we consulted about these scripts with, these are 3 different Kadu scripts that are all used for the same language and in the same region, but are distinct scripts with distinct script features. Though these are all listed as low priority at the moment, this example demonstrates the limitations of our knowledge. There's next to no information about these scripts online, let alone about their relationship with each other. And endangered indigenous languages like Kadu may have competing scripts within the user community as part of the language revitalization effort. And these debates around them might be politically charged or complicated to understand on a social level or a surface level, especially for us outside of the community. And then this is why research, fieldwork, and establishing close connections with the script community are incredibly important for understanding these scripts that we currently consider low priority.
As another example, there was a particularly dynamic ambiguity around the origins of the Adinkra symbols and the Adinkra alphabet, respectively. So first and foremost, starting with the Adinkra symbols, there are competing oral histories and timelines around the ideographic symbols. However, in Akan tree, and tree being a prominent language spoken in Ghana, the term Adinkra doesn't even refer to the symbols themselves, but rather the fabric, as you can see on the right, decorated by those symbols. And so the oldest known surviving Adinkra cloth or fabric was made in 1817. But since there are no existing historical records on when this cloth was first produced, or since there's no way to know whether the cloth or the symbols came first, their origins inherently interwoven, we can say, we decided to put 1817 in the air table, still fully acknowledging that the historical timelines continue to be blurred. And then pressing even further into this blurring, the Adinkra alphabet was created in Ghana in 2015 and then technically launched in 2018. And while it is aesthetically derived from the ideographic symbols of Adinkra, the alphabet itself is phonetic and the characters are comparatively simplified. So due to these critical differences in function and form, despite the visual derivation, the Adinkra alphabet can effectively be treated as a neography or a newly invented script. So again, bearing all of this in mind, like sort of sorting through these kinds of examples, despite those challenges, the Airtable has become the backbone of our work. And again, a living, breathing, dynamic record that unifies SEI's internal research, supports our collaborations with the world's writing systems and others, and now directly powers the interactive map and tables you'll see on our website. So thus far, we've discussed some of our internal outcomes of our work. Now we'll show you how this appears outwardly, again, on our website. So the SEI website relaunched in the spring of 2025 as a culmination of our efforts. Let me see, yes, it is playing. So you can see here examples of our old sites over the years. In previous iterations, though formatting had changed, the content remained largely the same. But this time, we took a step back and considered how we wanted to present SEI as an intersectional resource for different demographics through our branding. Designing a website is an arduous yet fulfilling experience. We pulled inspiration in structure and style from encyclopedia, library, museum, and academic research websites. And after reviewing the past sitemap, we gathered all of our old material, updated relevant links, found representative images, and continued to update other resources, found some curated readings, and in essence, we changed how our previous content was organized for the sake of intrigue and clarity, modeling expertise and accessibility, merging some pages and making key resources more prominent. And again, we also wanted to make sure that we incorporated some new educational resources. So, most pertinent of these is our scripts to encode page. This is where the rubric lives, serving as a legend to the color-coded pin drops on our clickable map. You can explore by region here. Very exciting. So then underneath that, we have a sortable, searchable table that reads in data routinely from our internal Airtable. Again, it's all connected, all very live, all very breathing. You can sort and search in the top categories here. And you could also click in the little search engine on the side. And when you click on a row, you can find more details such as script type, directionality, the link to the latest proposal, a script sample, etc. Other helpful new resources on our site include the completed scripts table, which links to accepted proposals, just to get some inspiration flowing, and the syllabi, which presents a curated list of academic writing about the Unicode standard and related technologies. We highly recommend this particular page for people who just want to get academically acclimated with the field at large. And our work, which shows presentations and publications by SCI's broader network, and this is a really rich trove of research. Media, which demonstrates that we are, in fact, out and about in the world and are perceived by said world in an active dialogue with press entities. We also have a dedicated page to the missing scripts, our collaboration with the ANRT Type Design School in Nancy, France, and the IDG Mainz graphic design program in Germany. You can see some of the fonts for minority scripts designed under the auspices of that program on this page. And I might have a slight bias, huge fan of this page as a blog manager. You could check out our blog, which you can peruse through the color-coded filters to see the SCI updates, guest contributions, research insights, script features, and interviews. And again, we are continually updating these resources and adding features to the site. So we'd happily collect your feedback on that. And with all of that being said, we'd love to open it up to you all for your questions and comments. Thank you so much again for your attention, and we look forward to the discussion.
I think we decided we weren't going to run around with the mic, or do you want to? Okay. As you wish.
So I had a question about like the boundaries of the script and encoding initiative. A lot of writing is written with a chisel or a writing utensil like a pencil, pen, or something with like a Gutenberg press or something like that. But what about something, I mean, it was mentioned briefly, like there's like, fabric, but what about if it's written in a knot, like a kipu or something like that? Or there's a writing system like Rongo, where the order kind of, there's not a strict ordering, and so and that doesn't quite fit into the existing Unicode standard as, is it left to right or right to left that you read it? And so I guess there's kind of a question of like, what are the boundaries for encoding a script if it's a script?
Yeah, I mean, we try not to decide that, but defer to scholars. And I think there are really live debates about what counts as writing. So we use the definition, like question 1 of that most people use, and Rongo, or the knotted scripts, for some reason, those don't tend to fall under writing because they don't match some of the characteristics of other writing systems. So the answer is that we follow consensus, but I don't know, it's interesting. We're working on some scripts, like the Auden cross samples are a good example, or there's a historic African script called NCBD, which could be writing, could not be writing. It's gestured, it's painted, but there are parts of it that definitely do seem like they're written records, like a verdict on a judgment. So we're trying to like dive into those more ambiguous categories and at least pull out the parts that do fit conventional definitions of writing. So we're taking on NCBD, but starting with a subset, for example.
Awesome. Well, first of all, I'm happy here. Helena had threaten me to come. No, I'm just kidding. I'm so excited. I mean, the UC Berkeley's SCI initiative seems very promising, and to leverage a very booming academic institution and environment where people can, in the most promising and shiniest years of their undergraduate studies, to leverage various research initiatives into scripts and, of course, how it ties into Unicode and technological applications as well. It's just so remarkable. And Kyra, Anushah, you know, thanks for all the work that you did. I felt like I learned a lot just from seeing this. I mean, not independent at all, just like a collaborative effort. I wanted to ask, because I know that in your qualitative rubric, which again is very unique, and I'm glad you guys were able to sort of take the initiative on creating one that can work very well in partnership with other institutions. The medium sector did mention that it was, you know, the script is deemed established and viable for Unicode inclusion. And I want to know, because you guys have sort of been using this rubric as a baseline, if you found any quantitative evaluative aspects through the empirical research that you've read and the proposals that are submitted for Unicode expansion, or I should say Unicode inclusion. Have you noticed any ties to any quantitative variables that are presented in the research? And have you guys ever considered including, you know, even if they're, you know, simple or regular expressions, into your mostly qualitative rubric?
It's a good question. Actually, we're starting to take this on. So we're really interested in the category of neographies, so invented scripts and specifically modern neographies. So we're bounding that like within the last 50 years because they are a really thorny problem for Unicode, I think. Like everyone is grappling with when a script should be considered stable or adopted enough. And it could be helpful to have some numbers like a couple hundred users is considered enough adoption, or it's been around and hasn't changed for X many years. Like we threw out 5 years, but all of this is really tentative. So we are starting a project that will at least go through all of Unicode's past decisions on neographies to see like what the de facto thresholds were, because like we have a lot of the people in the room today, so I'm curious to hear what you say. But sometimes it feels like the way this works is kind of like common law. Like people remember cases and they use those precedents and kind of reason through, but they're not working with a strict number like, oh, after this many years, you'd say yes or no. So I don't think anyone knows off the top of their head what the numbers should be.
And it has yet to be standardized.
Yeah, I don't think there are cut and fast, cut and dry rules about when something's in and when it's out. And I don't think we'll ever have that. But a starting point will be to go through and see what has effectively been the standard.
Awesome. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, Anushah?
Yeah, Anushah.
Back on that question. Oh, yeah, sorry. Even if a script is quote unquote standardized or recognized as a standard, the authority that provides that label of standardization, that needs to be evaluated as well. You have cases around the world where minority communities will develop a script. They'll go to a local authority or magistrate to get some sort of document that says this is an official script for this language. Another group does the same thing. So then you have competing scripts for the same language. They're both standards recognized by an authority. But then you get into these geopolitics and other sort of semantic debates about what does authority mean, what does standardization mean. So there's no clear rubric or no clear attribute for determining suitability or standardization of the script besides usage.
I also want to say that, building on what Anshu said, the same can be said about Unicode. Unicode is also a standard. So that's also what we're kind of looking into, is like what role Unicode plays in terms of like prescribing what the standard is, especially for newly invented script like neographies. They haven't reached the kind of natural standard that maybe some people will say for Latin. Everything was a beginning script at one point. It had to start somewhere. neographies were kind of like intervening in that process by encoding it into Unicode, which is a standard. So at some point, it's like deciding what the rules are before maybe they've fully solidified in that way. But then also in that process, those people do deserve to use their language on the internet. So there's kind of a weird middle ground that we need to navigate in that process.
Hi. I actually have a question about low-level languages, some of the ones that you put in that category because they weren't, I can't remember the exact language, but yes, and in particular bronze scripts and Oracle bones, that they're not, it hasn't settled enough or something like that.
Like the signs are too unstable.
The signs are too unstable. Okay, so I do know that there is like a foundry in Taiwan that has taken Oracle bones and bronze inscriptions and created a font based on that. And is that like, did they just like make it up, or how did that happen? I wonder if you had any context.
Debbie, do you want?
Okay, political, understood.
Oh, we have a cyanotype.
So I'm not familiar with the Oracle bone situation, but if you think, for instance, Egyptian hieroglyphs, something that people are familiar with, you know, you grow up in school and you learn, oh yeah, they created hieroglyphs. And so you can imagine somebody thinking, oh, I have a monetization, like a merchandising opportunity, right? I'm going to create a font, or I'm going to create T-shirts. I'm going to create something where I can, you know, create merchandise to sell to people, right? But there is a whole different world of users of the script who are the paleographers that are the ones that are seriously interested in that script, and the ones that are seriously interested in data interchange, right? The people creating merchandising, they're not so interested in data interchange. They're interested in selling merchandise, right? And so that might be a useful distinction to be watching. Are the people that want to exchange digital data in agreement on what's a repertoire of things that they would consider characters to be encoded?
Oh, okay. Just give a little bit background in the Oriole bone situation. But I'm just trying to reflect. It's a very complicated situation, but it's a very good discussion. And also depends, like Unicode, I think majority of them, at least in the beginning, is for the modern use, for the very, you know, the urge of use this technology for encoding. So we can go into the digital, you know, era, make things efficient. That's the major, you know, force push that. But when these things are established, there's so many other angles, like aerial bone. Has a multiple dimension. For one, if it's an ancient section of the language in Chinese, I mean the written symbol, language symbol, it has research interests and archaeology. So just to answer your question very quickly, those are definitely from archaeology development, discovery. But, you know, that makes things complicated. You don't discover all the symbol, or even there might exist. Nowadays, we don't discover them. So then you have this issue of, you know, incomplete information. It's a very common in all science and a discipline of study. So then that already raised a question, you know, what about to deal with systematically other things go so it become a more systematic field of knowledge or being can be used in a wider, front. So I'm just trying to bring up those interesting questions to open our wider, angle of looking at things. But I think that's for theory level of looking at things, but everything we have to do it from very concrete step. So I really, appreciate, the group here is doing that from the academic side or from the practical side.
To move on to the next session. Let's start in 2 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you.